Good morning. Today we are going to talk about variation and inheritance. But before starting with the main objectives of this lesson, I'm going to define variation and inheritance just to understand what we are going to talk about. So, the first concept, variation, variation actually means a change or difference. And because we are talking about the humans, so we are going to study the change or difference between individuals. Whereas the second concept in the title is inheritance. Inheritance means the transmission of genetic information from generation to generation. So the first objective in this lesson that you have to know that there is variation between individuals of the same species. Some of these differences are inherited, which means that the genetic information transmission from generation to generation, whereas other differences are acquired or learned during the life of the individual. So, living organisms vary in many ways. For example, humans all have the same set of body organs like stomach, heart, intestines, whatever, and also all have the same general shape. At the same time, humans have some features differ from one person to the next, like eye color, hair color, skin color, height, language, and so on. And these are examples of individual variations. So, the change or difference between individual is called individual variation. Again, the change or difference between individuals is called individual variation. Okay. But you have to know that some of these features may be inherited characteristics or acquired characteristics. Now, what do we mean by inherited characteristics? Or what do we mean when we say that this type of disease, which is cystic fibrosis, is inherited? Actually, cystic fibrosis, when exocrine glands cause the production of abnormally thick mucus, leading to blockage of the pancreatic ducts, intestines, and the bronchi, and often resulting in respiratory infection. So, the question again, what do we mean when we say cystic fibrosis is inherited? Actually, the answer is that this disease is transmitted, or the genetic information of this disease is transmitted from generation to another generation. So when any disease transmitted or inherited, that means its genetic information transmitted from generation to another generation. So, as we said before, that inheritance means the transmission of genetic information from generation to generation. Okay, what about acquired characteristics? And what is the meaning of acquired characteristics? Actually, acquired characteristics is a modification or change in an organ or tissue that is due to use, disuse, or environmental effects during an organism's lifetime. For example, the body mass can be changed by an adjustment to the diet. So, example of acquired characteristics, the body mass. So, to know if this characteristic is inherited or acquired, we have to study this characteristics. So, the study of inherited characteristics and the way they are passed on from one generation to another actually is called genetics. So, genetics means the study of inherited characteristics and the way they are passed on from one generation to another. But you have to know that if you want to understand genetics, you have to understand the molecule DNA. So when we study inheritance, we are looking for answers to several important questions. Those questions are, the first one, what is a characteristic? Why does a cell or organism develop a certain characteristic? How can characteristics be passed on accurately from one cell to another? And how are the characteristics of two different organisms combined at fertilization? And how do characteristics vary from one organism to another and from one generation to another? Actually, to answer these questions or answer of these questions help us in many ways. The first thing, when we answer these questions, that will increase our understanding about genetic diseases. So we will understand more about genetic diseases and to develop techniques to add wanted characteristics to our domestic animals and the plants. So if we want to change some characteristics in animals and the plants, we can use this technique. So to develop this technique, or we develop this technique to change the characteristics that we want in animals and plants. Okay, so if you remember, as we said, that the production of offspring by sexual reproduction always requires the production of gametes, which are ovum and sperm, and fertilization. So we need gametes, ovum, sperm to fertilize. So the process here is fertilization. So actually, the only part of the male gamete, sperm in mammals, that goes to form the zygote is the nucleus. Nucleus, not the tail or any part in the sperm. Only the nucleus, which is in the head of the sperm. So the nucleus is the main part which goes to form the zygote. Okay. And the second thing that you have to know about sexual reproduction, that the gametes are formed by cell division, and also the young organism develops from a single fertilized egg by cell division. So the main process here which form the zygote and the embryo is cell division. Okay, now you know that the inheritance characteristics are passed on during reproduction. And as we said, the most important part in the gametes is the nucleus. So let's study the structure of the nucleus and how it behaves during cell division. So focus in this diagram. Here we have a nucleus, and inside it there is a thread-like structures of DNA. This is a nucleus, and we have thread-like structures of DNA. Those structures carry the genetic information in the form of genes. So this structure carries the genetic information in form of genes. Those structures are called chromosomes. So actually inside each nucleus in humans, there is 23 pairs of chromosomes, 46 chromosomes in total. 23 pairs, but 46 chromosomes in total. So this is the shape of chromosome. In the middle of the chromosome, there is an attachment point for the spindle fibers. During cell division, this point is called centromere. So here in the middle, we have something called centromere. This centromere divides the two spindle fibers during cell division. So we have the spindle fibers. They attach together by a point called centromere. It appears during cell division. Here also we have chromosome and we have a centromere in the middle of two spindle fibers. Now you have to know that each chromosome contains a very long coiled strand of DNA. We have long strand of DNA, and each one is divided into short sections of DNA called genes. And also each gene carries the coded information for the production of protein by the cell. Again, each chromosome contains a very long coiled strand of DNA, and each one is divided into short sections of DNA, those short sections called genes. And each gene carries the coded information for the production of protein by the cell. So now, you know that the chromosomes carry genetic information, which means the information that gives the particular characteristics to a cell. Okay, now the question is, how do scientists know that the chromosomes carry genetic information? Actually, the answer is when they studied the behaviors of a cell, they found many evidences. The first one, if sections of a chromosome are transferred from one cell to another, the characteristics of the recipient cell change. So, if we remove one section of chromosome and we add it to another cell, the shape of the cell will change. The second thing, if chromosomes are deliberately damaged, the characteristics of the cell also change. So if we damage one of the chromosome, the characteristic of the cell will change. In some cells, the chromosomes are seen to swell when proteins are being manufactured in the cells. As we said, that each gene carries the coded information for the production of a protein by the cell. So, in some cells, the chromosomes are seen to swell when proteins are being manufactured more. And actually, the last point, we will talk about it later on, which is the difference between the nuclei of male and female cells. So, the last thing in this lesson, don't forget to memorize chromosome, which means a thread-like structure of DNA carrying genetic information in the form of genes. And gene is a length of DNA that codes for a specific protein. Now, let's watch this video to revise the structure of the nucleus.
What if we get to know the probability of us falling a prey to a particular disorder in advance? What if we can predict serious disorders like cancer using simple medical testing? Is that possible? Or is it just fiction? Well, no. It's already being done. The concept of genetic testing, or the technique in which our genes or chromosomes are tested, help us here. So what are chromosomes? We've always come across the saying, humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. But what are they made up of? And where are they actually located in the cell? Let's try and answer all of these queries in this session. Here we have this simple cell as an example. Can you see the thread-like structures here in the nucleus? These threads are called chromatids. They are usually tangled in this fashion when present in a regular active cell. Now, what if the cell has to undergo division? Is it possible to divide this single cell into two equal halves with such a tangled bundle of threads? Of course not. Imagine we have these different colored threads tangled together. If we were to separate them, then what should be the first thing we should do? We will first separate each thread and then make separate bunches. In a similar way, even the cells separate these chromated threads. This process is aided by condensation of threads. It means these chromated material will gradually start coiling like a telephone wire. As a result, the threads will gain structures like these. Are we familiar with this kind of a structure? Have we come across it before? That's correct. It is the structure of a typical chromosome. What are chromosomes? Well, we'll get into their details in the upcoming sessions. For now, we need to get a basic idea about them. So we have this cell with threads sorted in this classical chromosome structure. This structure is seen only when the cell is in the process of division. So can we say that both chromatids and chromosomes are the same? Yes, they are. The different names are for the different structures. Now the next question is, what are these threads, or chromosomes to be precise, made up of? If we zoom into the structure of this chromosome, we find small segments like these that make up the complete structure. These functional segments are nothing but genes. So can we say that chromosomes are made up of genes? Absolutely. All these segments make up the whole structure. Now let me ask you one more interesting question. Do you think the genes will also be made up of something? Will there be units that make up these segments? If your answer is yes, then you're absolutely right. Genes are also made up of some units. If we zoom inside this gene segment, then we find large molecules like these that make up the segment. These large molecules, or macromolecules to be precise, are DNA molecules. This is not a new term for us. We are quite familiar with the term DNA as it's very commonly used these days. But what exactly are these DNA molecules? Well, this single large molecule is composed of 3 units. And what units are these? Let's reserve this explanation for our upcoming videos. For now, all we need to know is that DNA is made up of these units. Now to quickly review what we learned, let me remove the text from the screen. These 3 combine to give us a single molecule. And many such DNA molecules form long chains. What is a sequence of DNA molecules called? That's right, it's called a gene. So technically, segments of DNA molecules which form functional units are called genes. And many genes come together to form thread-like structures called chromosomes. Chromosome is the classical structure obtained only during cell division. When the cell is not in the dividing phase, the genetic material is present in the form of tangled threads called chromatids. So this is the basic idea of the genetic materials in our cells, which we needed to understand in order to look at the laws in genetics. Let's get introduced to the laws in genetics put forth by Gregor Mendel in the next part.
Okay, thank you for listening. Please, when you finish studying this lesson, answer the questions page 193 and send them to me in B12. Thank you for listening. Good luck. Bye bye.